So Jeff, let's kick it off. Just
Right.
as an official intro, why don't you introduce yourself really quickly, and I'll introduce myself, and then we've got some questions that people sent in.
Sure. My name is Jeff Toister, and the reason I'm part of this, I'm a customer service trainer by heart and trade. Why you should be paying attention to me is I've done remote training for almost 20 years, and I'm a certified professional in learning and performance. So this is something I've done as a former training director, and now I've been guiding clients with this for about 15 years. And so I'm just honored, Micah, that get a chance to chat with you today, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I met Jeff at ICMI. That's one of the bigger call center trade shows you can go to, like CCW, ICMI, and Jeff does sessions there. Attended it, really enjoyed it. It was super engaging, and then we were able to do some webinars together in the past on reducing onboarding time. So my name is Micah Peterson. I work at Procedureflow, obviously, and what we do is we have software that helps you to do scenarios. So you can lay out visual scenarios that people to follow, and that helps. Scenario-based training is a thing. It helps reduce onboarding time, and then is relevant also to have digital tools, of course, in this time transition. So that's our interest in generally in this topic today. But we really know that there's, outside of what we can do with Procedureflow, there's just so many questions and so much things that people are going through and want to understand. And so we thought by bringing Jeff in and his expertise, we can try to address as many of those things as possible. So why don't we get started? We got our first question here. And what we decided to do instead of PowerPoints, meta, is Jeff had given me the idea that we would take, you can do this on your own thing, but you might have a clipboard somewhere at home and you're writing on it, and it's creating suspense, and people are like, what's he putting on that thing? And then so we have our questions here. And I took my wife's special art paper, so I'll have a different drawing every time with a different design. And then we drum roll, we'll flip it over. We got a question. So the first one here, and I'm gonna have trouble reading it because it's backwards on my screen, but it's forward for you guys. So Jeff, why don't you actually read that question?
Oh, well, you're taking a big leap of faith here that I can read. So the first question is what is the biggest challenge to keep the participants highly engaged? And I want to start by kind of asking all of you a question. And so if you're tuned in, if you have a piece of paper, something to write on, I want you to write down the answer to this question. So I'm going to do what Micah did. Hang on just a second. You can also answer via the chat box, but I want you to write this down.
Can you feel the suspense, people?
The suspense, right?
He's
okay,
holding our attention.
Hopefully you can see this. So training, what? Fundamentally problem solving. So Micah, what is it?
So training equals problem solving. We had a little bit of glare there too. So training equals problem solving. And then what problem are you solving? So training equals problem solving.
Training
what problem am I
it.
solving? Okay.
So what problem are you fundamentally solving?
Like why did they come here today? Like why?
Yeah. What problem are we trying to solve?
Okay, I'm writing down.
Let's see what people say. And if you want to share via chat what your answer is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think I know. I got mine.
Okay. There is, and for those of you who are chatting, notice when you're facilitating, even with we're using Zoom today, right? Any web conferencing platform, any live training, there's always going to be a little bit of a delay while you wait for participants to catch up.
Yeah.
It's okay to be silent for just a few seconds.
Okay. Yeah, it's nerve-wracking. You don't want to lose people's attention, right? But
right.
That's okay. So it's worth it for the interaction. So we're getting from the chat here a few people. Hello to Brad Cleveland, and thanks for the shout out. And we have Melissa saying how to help trainers switch from in-person to virtually training effectively. I think a lot of people would share that. Training pieces, engagement, nesting, how to see what each person is doing with hands-on activities. I know that's another one that's going to come up tough, you know.
It is.
So, yep. So here's
So
some of the challenges people are trying to solve.
it is, and I want you as trainers to take away from this question that we often overcomplicate things, and so we have a ringer. I think Susan said training is the transfer of knowledge necessary to perform a task or role. This is the problem we're solving today, all of us. Micah, what is it at the bottom?
We gotta help people to do their jobs.
That's it. That is the problem. So when you're thinking about engagement, first and foremost, we want to think, how am I helping someone do their job? Forget virtual training. Just think training in general. How am I helping someone do their job? And then you can adapt that premise, the answer to that question, to the virtual tools. So back to that question of engagement. We've already demonstrated a couple of them. We've used chat. So we're chatting here. We're getting people to participate. We have used you can have people, I asked you to grab a piece of paper. We can have people do work on their own or complete activities on their own.
And then show it afterwards when you call them out.
Absolutely. Yep. And I know we have a poll too, don't we, Micah? Do we have a poll that we can launch?
I think we do.
Let's try that. So you can use polls to gather information, but when you are facilitating training, especially with smaller groups, I think we've made our poll anonymous today, but you can make your poll non-anonymous and allow people to participate and turn the poll into a quiz question. So for example, we've got this poll up now. Hopefully you can see it. How often should participants interact in a live webinar? And your options are pick the best one. Yeah.
Big battle between 5 minutes and 10 minutes. Oh, we got one taker on 20 and nobody yet for the, no, webinars don't need to be interactive. So
just listen to my speech here.
So we'll give that a little bit more. Good numbers coming in. It looks like every 10 minutes is winning right now. So 60% on that one and 30% on 5 minutes. So can you see the results coming in?
Not yet, but then there's an option once you toggle that, you should be able to display the results for everybody. Oh, look at that. Okay.
I'm learning here too. So
bad news here. It really should be every 5 minutes.
Wow.
And 10 minutes would be if I'm live, because if I'm in person, I have physical proximity to kind of engage people. A webinar should be every 5 minutes. So
how do did we violate our own rule there?
Not at all.
Or I guess.
Yeah.
We had stopped to do some questions.
Chat. Polling.
Yeah.
Self-paced activities.
Right. Okay.
We've done at least 3 or 4 different activities in the first 11 minutes.
It's not a poll every 5 minutes. It's just something cognitively that you've introduced that gets somebody's attention. Yeah.
That's the key. And I would encourage all of you, don't overthink this. We don't have to get crazy. Simple is good. In fact, one of the things that I live by is I think about what would I do as a best practice in a live classroom in person, and then I adapt that to the materials or the tools that I'm using.
Yeah, I had an epiphany. I was talking and getting ready for this. I reached out to a bunch of friends that I have that are really excellent trainers, like Sherry Kendall and Bill Leisure and some other folks, and just was like, because your focus is just on the remote part, right? Like, and it's just like, how do we solve this problem? And they're all like, the things that you do to make a live classroom interactive and fun are the same. It's the same principles, and they're amplified now, right? Because you can't rely on just standing over people and making sure they're not playing games on their phone, right? Like, you can't do that anymore. So now it's like, now you can't see their face necessarily. You don't know what they're doing. And it's like, now it really needs to be engaging, right?
Yeah. So Micah, I want to, I know you've got more questions that people sent in ahead of time, and people are sending in some questions now. I want to pause for a moment, just because we have and encourage everyone, send your questions via chat. We may not be able to get all of them, but I think we're going to work on like a follow-up. But there's a question that Rhea had about, what's the ideal group size for remote sessions?
Okay.
And for a live session, so remember, remote training is not 100% live. It doesn't have to be. For a live session, if I'm facilitating training where I have to observe people learning, it's doable at 25, which has been it's a standard that I use for in person, where 25, I can generally still observe everybody learning in person. Via webinar, it really depends. I can't have 25 people on camera talking. That's too much. That probably goes down to maybe 10. Just think about the Brady Bunch graphic, right? That was what, 9, right? That was a lot. So the group gets smaller and smaller the more dialogue.
So basically what you're saying is you should be able to form some kind of a band, like Jimmy Fallon style. And
that's right.
If it's getting beyond the Jimmy Fallon band, you've maybe crossed over.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways,
and that's going to be, I know that's going to be tough for some people because they might not have the number of trainers they need to, the ratio might be off, but certainly your advice is good there. So we'll keep that first question, I think, as a general theme, like how do you keep it engaging? I know that Kelly has also asked here, like, what are some other things besides polls that we can do? I don't know if you want to hammer off 5 off your hand, or if you want to kind of circle back to that as we answer the other questions.
Let's circle back, because we've already done 3, right? We've demonstrated 3 in this webinar.
That's fair.
Let's circle back to that one. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the next one. So we've got mint chocolate chip, and we are going to this one. So you want to read that out?
Yeah. What are some of your tried and true methods of engaging the quiet remote agent? So we have 66 people on this webinar live right now. We do not have 66 people chatting with us. I imagine we didn't have 66 people polling. So this webinar is a little different. It would be too big for something I would consider, like if I'm training inside a company, I wouldn't have 66 people on the webinar. That's too much. But what can we do to engage the quiet people? We're going to give them a lot of different options. So one option is pre and post assignments. Don't think of training as just live. What do you ask people to do beforehand? What can you ask people to do afterwards? Even if they're quiet during the live portion, if you have a live portion, having pre and post assignments, that's telling you if they know the content, if they can do it, etc. We also have the ability in smaller groups, not today, but if I have, let's say, 15 people on a live Zoom meeting, I can put them into breakouts where they can see each other on camera, hear each other's audio, and have a discussion just like they would in a in-person training course. And many people are more comfortable with the small group rather than the big group. We have quizzes, which we already demonstrated. You can see individually who's responded. I used to do this webinar compliance training. I used to do sexual harassment prevention training. We had all sorts of requirements for interactions. I'd even get company CEOs to participate in the webinar. And the way we'd get everybody to participate is if I saw someone wasn't responding, I could nudge them even via individual chat, like, hey, I think you've got something to say about this. Why don't you respond? Or give people an extra moment to respond to the
in the Zoom here, it says all panelists, or I can just scroll down and pick on an individual person.
Absolutely.
And then I can just write them individually. So that's a great tip. On the breakout ones too, one thing that I've heard is where you might take a part of your curriculum that you would normally teach and give that out to people ahead of time, as you mentioned, like some pre and post assignments. And then maybe a team of 4 or 5 people get together, consume that, work on it together, and then work to present it back to the group, maybe with one of the representatives from their team. And so just what you do at small group tables.
What would I do in an in-person training? I think for a lot of us that are on the webinar today, we're used to that. If I would do something like a breakout group or a teach back in person, I can do the same thing in a webinar. I just have to adapt. I think that the one principle to think about is if your training program was lousy in person, it will be lousy remote. So
100%.
Good training is good training.
Yeah. And I think we all intuitively know what lousy means, but do you want to just put a couple bullet points on that to let people know what are some of the common fails of
Yes.
of training that even if you're in the room is really not very engaging?
There's one.
One.
There's
There's only one.
At the
bullet
beginning,
point.
we clarified what is the training is problem solving.
Yep.
And what problem are we trying to solve? Help people do their jobs.
Yep.
So if my training is not helping people do their jobs better, it's a fail.
Okay.
If it's helping them do their jobs better, it's successful by some definition, right? Within budget constraints, time constraints, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So let's, we'll jump into here. I got another one. Some of these might be a little bit faster. So I've got this time, maybe some sort of a peach thing. So want to read that one?
Oh, someone's getting really technical. What type of LMS systems have you worked with? Would you recommend? How do you train multiple systems in a virtual environment?
Mm-hmm.
I would say this is not necessarily a question for going from remote to or from in-person to remote.
Okay.
So very briefly, if you're not familiar with LMS, it's a learning management system.
Okay.
And it's basically just a piece of software that helps you coordinate all of your training.
Okay.
So the only caveat I'll give you is that make sure you're using a learning management system that allows you to work with the tools that you're using, or vice versa, select tools that work with your existing learning management system.
Right.
But the specific system, other than that, really isn't, to me as a trainer, not that important.
Okay. And I would say generally that when you go to Google or something like that, there are applications like Capterra or G2 Crowd that help you kind of sort through if there's a category of software that you want to purchase or buy and invest in, that will do the rating and ranking for you and has all of the reviews from customers on, you know, which ones are the best and they like the best. So I would definitely recommend using G2 Crowd or Capterra to sort through which one you feel might be the best for what you're looking for.
Yeah. So, Mike, I want to pause for just a moment because we've gotten a couple of questions that are asking for clarification or reiteration, right? And rather than us address them, because we have a lot of other questions we want to come to, I want to point out to participants, this is another way to interact. It's not just Micah and Jeff sharing. If you are reading a question in the chat box and you say, hey, I know the answer to that question, feel free to respond.
Oh, it says that they can't see the other people's chat, so that might be my bad.
If it's all panelists and attendees, we should be able to. But that's a good thing if we're not toggled. Oh, let's see. Oops, can't see other messages. All right, so.
That's
we'll have to circle. We'll have to circle back to that.
Allow attendees to chat with all panelists.
There it is. And attendees.
Okay. Good. Okay. So let's try it again. Now we can. Oh, that's so much better.
Hey, all right.
I felt bad because I could see everybody and it was interesting. Okay. Well, here we're solving problems. And that actually, somebody did mention to me that one thing that would be really good as you're approaching remote training classrooms is to just bring a technical person from your company, like have maybe a young whippersnapper IT guy or something that can just come to your first few sessions and get, you know, while you're teaching, they can be helping people out with technical issues because that could eat up a lot of your time as you're transitioning. So.
Yeah, good stuff.
So Donna Franklin had mentioned a question fairly early or, you know, earlier about she didn't understand the breakout thing. And I think that's maybe a great example of maybe somebody would want to, I'd be certainly happy to answer that question, but maybe somebody else would like to try just for our meta purposes. And Donna, if we don't get to yours on that specific issue, I'll give you a call.
Yeah.
There we go. So Melissa's
already getting an answer.
Melissa's helping her out here.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, you can also pull outside of the webinar, you can go to say Zoom, pull the knowledge base article, and then copy it, paste it right into chat. So if you can answer it and then include a link to the article that goes deeper, and participants can do that. You also see that participants have told us, facilitators, what's working and what's not, which is what we would do in a live in-person classroom. You do the same thing in a live webinar. So anyways, I know we got more questions, but we're demonstrating as we go some of these different tools.
And I'll say as well, we're going to take a transcript of all the chat, everything that's happening, the questions that were asked beforehand, and Amanda and I are going to work together to do a write-up on, and with you, Jeff, as well, so that we can actually, along with this, publish the answers to other questions, and maybe do a part 2 if that makes sense. So here's another one. We're going to keep moving.
Right.
We're 25 minutes in, so this one's a fun little party scene, and the question is,
how do we keep people engaged who don't have a face or like a webcam? So I want to share with you a couple of things to think about. One, we've been doing this webinar. You can see Micah and myself. You can't see everybody else. So a decision point for all of you should be, how many people do I need on this webinar? And I can give you, if we're doing live, right? I could give you 2 different scenarios. If I have 50 plus people, I don't want to see 50 faces. So we've demonstrated throughout the webinar, whether it's chat, polling, self-paced activities, you can still keep people engaged. If I have a smaller group, maybe it's 10 people, then I don't have that issue necessarily, although sometimes people have limitations with they don't have a webcam, the technology isn't there, maybe they don't have the bandwidth. So video really does eat up a lot of bandwidth.
Okay.
And in the early days, when I was doing this, let's say 10 years ago, we wouldn't put people on webcam because we just didn't have the internet capacity if people were working from home, for example.
I know like that was one of the questions that was sent in as well, is what about rural people? And so you kill 2 birds with 1 stone here.
Yeah. So you always want to, you could still engage people. You just need to make sure you don't forget that they're there, right? And it's nice to have, but it's not essential to have people on video.
And I would say too, I think people are getting used to this idea that Zoom just kind of drops you into this face on all the time thing, and people are doing it with their families and church groups and all that stuff. So one thing you see below here, Amanda is actually with us. And so she's taken a picture of Procedureflow, and Jeff Toister put it together. But you can just take your face. So if I stop sharing my video for a second, you'll see my my handsome LinkedIn picture there. And so you could ask people to basically update their Zoom profiles so that at least if there's no camera showing, you can still see who it is on the block and that kind of thing. So, all right. So here's one. It's a little bit long, so we're going to flip it around.
Okay. What tools or programs do you use during classroom training? What tools or programs are available to tap into agent screens when they are doing activities? Okay. So a couple of different things. We are, of course, using Zoom today, but there are a ton of webinar clients that you can use. I've used a lot. I like Zoom because it's got the combination of features and it's easy for people, but whatever, maybe your company has a WebEx account or something else. So use the tools that you have. When it comes to training, especially if we're mentioning agents and looking at screens, I would replicate the real or production environment as much as I possibly can. Okay. So if you have screen sharing capability, because that's part of your quality monitoring process, I would use that same tool as part of training if the tool allows it.
So you mean like while you're running the training class, they're using your work laptops, for contact center, and they might have like Nice in Contact or whatever, and they're recording the screens. So you're going through your sessions, and then you can actually record all those sessions, pick them up, and your QA people or whoever can review them afterwards, that type of thing.
You could do that quite easily as part of their training. You can also, a lot of, as a facilitator, if I want people to see my screen, Zoom and others have very simple screen sharing capabilities.
Right.
And so you can use that. If you have, I think if you have, for example, we haven't talked a lot about knowledge bases, but a big fundamental part of training is making sure that they're using the same tools in training that they are on the job.
Yep.
So one of the things you can challenge people with is say, what is our current shipping time to Alaska or whatever, right?
Yep.
You should have a knowledge base article or some resource that provides that answer immediately. And so the task or the challenge for your participants is to use the tool they would use on the job and immediately find the answer to that question, right? Go into Procedureflow. Oh, here it is. Alaska right now. We're shipping 5 days out. Okay. Now we've replicated that.
So you're a big proponent of teach a man to fish, essentially, right? And there's an assumption there that the tools that you've made available to them, example, the knowledge base, any sort of guidance material you've given them, they should be able to go through that. And instead of memorize an answer, they should be able to go find it, because there's just like, if you're a retail company and you have to support 2,000 different refrigerator products or, something like that, you just can't know every detail about everything, right?
Yeah. Oh, no. And that's exactly it. That we have to reframe the problem. The old way of thinking was, how do I get people to memorize all of this information? But that's not the problem. The problem is giving the correct answer quickly. And I was lucky enough to work in a contact center environment in the late 90s, where we had some, at the time, cutting edge tools. I was in apparel. And one of my teams that I work with, we would hyperlink catalog pages. So a customer would pull up a catalog page. We'd know what they were looking at. This is pre-internet, pre-ordering online. This is really
dating yourself here, Jeff.
I know, but the principle remains the same today. And so the customer would be like, I'm on page 12 and I'm looking at this blouse and I want to know, is this pre-shrunk? To your point, we have thousands of products. How are they going to know that? Oh, they can click on the page that the customer is looking at in their catalog, and a little dialog box would come up that had all the relevant product information. And without missing a beat, the agent would say, oh, it absolutely is pre-shrunk. But even with pre-shrunk cotton, you can expect about 6% shrinkage if you wash it in warm water. Now that seems like an expert that's telling you. The customer doesn't know that they just, in line with the conversation, clicked on a button and read something that my team had pre-programmed, and they don't need to know, nor do they care. To the customer, it sounds like they're an expert.
And
tools,
from a training perspective, I was rewatching the reducing onboarding webinar we did in October, which we'll send out a link for. But you gave an interesting, you did an interesting thing on the webinar, which I think is meta again on this, what we're doing, where you said, hey, everybody, I want you to go right now. And so I could be saying this to you guys, right? Like, go find me the perfect wine storage temperature, right? Yeah. And so you could memorize that fact maybe, or I can Google it, and in 5 seconds, I know the answer to that question. And so teaching people to go and find that, and then using that in your training to say, hey, we're going to stop, and I'm not going to tell you this and you're not going to memorize it. I want you to go look it up. First person back with the answer wins, right?
That's it. That's it. Yep.
Yeah, I like that. Amanda's also posted that the link to that one we did in October in the chat there as well. So let's do another one. You ready?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay. This is one that is coming up a lot. I know this can drive a lot of pain, especially extra average handle time and stuff. So here we go.
Okay. What process, methods, or tools are used for nesting? What works best for them to feel supported and connected with being alone in their home? All right, here's where Jeff says something that's going to sound weird to you. I find that nesting is typically a sign of a failed training program.
Uh-oh.
I know. I don't like nesting.
Everybody. No, it's good.
When I ran a contact center training department, I stopped nesting because what it told me was we hadn't trained the person. So what do we do instead? Let's go back to the fundamental problem, which is training should be helping them do their job. And why do contact centers use nesting? It's typically because we have not been verifying whether or not they can do their job. We've just gone through the content.
So
And
it's like
now
a
they're
it's like a
still
a
unsure.
real life testing period, you know, where you're
Yeah.
finding out whether the training worked or not.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the way I evaluated training, and if you want to think about, how do I evaluate training and skip nesting? The first thing is we have to ask ourselves, what does a fully trained person look like? Like not physically, but what can they do? And I
Right.
bet most of you have quality monitoring guidelines to evaluate your agents. I use
Yeah.
those same guidelines to evaluate training. And then we
Okay.
work backwards to figure out what do they need to be able to do to meet those guidelines. The last thing then we do is we have them demonstrate those skills. And notice I didn't say, we didn't give them quizzes. Quizzes are okay, but they're not a skill demonstration. So a skill demonstration might be replying to an email and doing it quickly and effectively with a correct answer, right? Or managing 2 simulated chat sessions at once and providing great responses to both customers, or on the phone, actually having a conversation. Now, what I would do instead of nesting is with the trainer, our learners would take live calls
Oh,
with the
really?
trainer right there.
Okay.
And at first it might be one-on-one. So other people might listen in, a little bit of pressure,
Okay.
but the trainer would be right there. And if anything happened, they were the safety net. But at that point, we'd train them to the level where we were reasonably comfortable that they were able to handle it. And people get stuck. But what should you do when you're training? You should be training people to know what to do when they get stuck, whether it's
Right.
how to correctly put someone on hold.
Right.
Who are your associates? Who are your resources, your expert hotline, for example, or
Right.
how to pause and look something up in the knowledge base. So that was all part of the training. And if you're doing all of that, you shouldn't need the separate post-training thing called nesting.
So if I come back to that question, then
Yeah.
the challenge here, and certainly if you can take live calls in a training classroom environment, it's awesome, right? If they're doing this remote thing, how do they approach some of the technical difficulties there?
So it is, I don't think it fundamentally changes. So I'll give you an
Okay.
example. UPS, their contact center in Las Vegas, Nevada, while they were on premise, agents did the bulk of their training from their actual workstation.
Okay.
And so we think about that as the model. We start, if we're at home right now, right? That's our
Yeah.
workstation.
Yep.
All of our training is here. So whatever tools you would use for remote work, whether it's your CRM system, your phone system, your contact, all of those different things, we want to make sure that we're training them in an environment that replicates that.
Okay.
A second piece that will help immensely is a sandbox. And if you're not familiar with this, it's the ability to, in a safe environment where you're not actually touching live customer records, pull up like a pre-populated customer record, John
Okay.
Doe from
Like a
101 Main Street,
simulator, like either a
simulated.
testing environment or some sort of
Exactly.
simulator. Yeah. Yeah.
So that helps a lot. If not, I've worked in contact centers where we had that, and we just had to pre-populate records that we used for our customer scenarios.
Yeah.
I've worked in contact centers where we did not have that. We just had to have some protocols for agents to make sure that they weren't actually, sending out orders customers didn't order, or
Yeah.
changing customers' records permanently.
Yeah.
So you can work around that, but rather than get too technical, I would say replicate the actual job as closely as you can
As close as you
in
can.
training using the tools you're already using in your live environment.
Yeah. And that moves onto an area that I do feel like, I have past history and a couple of things. One is if you've got some sort of a big system like Oracle, if you're in the utility space, or maybe telecom, that kind of thing, they have products like UPK that are out there where you can build a simulator very quickly. And what it does is it looks like they're clicking on the user interface, but they're not. And it's just going through the conditionals, and they can go in a lot of directions. So UPK for Oracle, I think Adobe Captivate has the capability to create simulators. It's fairly cost effective, and you can start building them right today. Because I know you might not have them, right? But you need them. And so you might be able to take a few business analyst resources and start building out some common paths of things you have to do in the CRM system or whatever. Start recording that in Adobe Captivate, create the simulator, and then get that out to people so that as you're teaching, they can actually click along in the system, because obviously we don't want them to destroy, public records of live systems.
I think the thing you have to balance is, I imagine most people on the webinar today are in a position where they're saying, I need to go remote now. And a lot of those training programs are fairly easy to use, but there's still this kind of steep learning curve. So I would caution everybody, there are great tools out there, but start with the tools you have and make sure you're maximizing those, and then start adding solutions to solve specific problems. Because you could really get overwhelmed with the technology.
Yeah. Do we need to do anything interactive? Or has it been too long? Or is this?
We've been violating our own concepts here.
I know.
Absolutely.
We obviously want to try to answer as many questions as we can with the last 20 minutes here, but do you have something that you want to try?
So I want to ask, this is a simple review activity that anybody can do. I want to ask participants via chat to share with us something that's resonated with them so far from this discussion. And I'll give you a few options. One is it confirms something you already knew. And sometimes that's great. You're like, we're doing that? And that's a best practice?
Sure. Yeah.
Second option is it took something you already knew, but maybe just filled in a missing piece. You're like, that was what we needed. Third option would be it took something you knew from a completely different angle. For example, like the concept of going from in-class live to remote, it's basically the same, just using different technology. Right. And then the fourth option is this completely blew your mind. You'd never even thought about this before. So if you would share via chat something that resonated from you from our discussion so far, that is our, we've waited too long to be interaction break. Thanks, Micah. Good call.
You're welcome. And maybe while people are doing that, there's one I want to line up that didn't really fit with the theme of remote training, but I think it's something that people are struggling with just human beings and these people that we're interacting with. So I'll just read this one out. It says, how do you keep agents who are new to remote work engaged with the rest of the team and the organization as a whole? I think everybody's had like a moment, during this COVID thing where I might get a little emotional even saying this, but about 2 weeks in, a friend who has cancer texted me and he said, we really miss you guys. Like, we haven't seen you guys at church and all that stuff. And I just wrecked me. It was like a Friday. I had my first, isolation breakdown. And I felt really alone, and I didn't have, I wasn't really conscious of how I was going to keep working, keep doing everything that I needed to do to keep Procedureflow on the rails, but also just deal with like missing everybody and not seeing friends and stuff. So I'm like, get it under control here. This one hit home with me, like just this idea of like, how do we got to train, we got to get people up to speed, but maybe people are dealing with stuff or they're just going through a hard time. And what are some tips that you have for just making sure that we're shepherding people and keeping them whole?
I think, Micah, your story and example brings forward two concepts that I think are very important. One is making sure you're checking in with people. I've worked for years with remote employees, and if we're calling them remote employees versus employees as part of our daily concept, we've already branded them as being a little different, right?
Sure, yeah.
We're reaching out to them just like we would have those informal conversations in the hallway, making sure we're reaching out to our colleagues that are not with us, bringing them into the conversation. That's really important. The second piece that resonates with your story is allowing people to have their humanity. And, if sometimes, especially in times like this, where we know everybody is going through something that's challenging, is allowing people some space to share that. I think that's good. So I appreciate you sharing that example. I know you weren't intentionally being meta here for a moment.
No, no, no.
It's a real example, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure that resonated with people.
And I want to mention too, I mentioned my cousin is a high school teacher, and she just talked about, like, trainers, teachers often care about their students, and they care about their well-being and their success. And it's hard sometimes if you don't have them for a whole year, like a teacher does, and you're just getting to know these people. But just how much it means when you reach out, just one-on-one people, or you see somebody's drifting or they're not communicating, and if you can just reach in one-on-one and just offer, like, be friendly, be approachable, have open door, let people know they're not bothering you, and then and then reach out when you need to. But all of that's going to create a tighter classroom experience, I think. So yeah. All right, so we got some write-ins here. Jeff, how do you want to handle that?
I want to get to those. I want to share we haven't been doing screen sharing at all.
Yep.
We can, but some of you pointed out, this is a little more engaging, just PowerPoint. I want to share with people one thing, because I know sometimes people are still doing a lot of lecture, for example. And here's the beauty of remote or virtual training versus in person. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen very briefly and share something with you. Let's see. Hopefully you can see this. Can you see this page, Micah?
I can. It says watching, video. Welcome. Okay. Yep.
So this is one of my LinkedIn learning courses, and it's all training videos. What I want to point out to people, though, is that the whole course is just under 30 minutes long. But if you can see to the right side of the screen, you see the different segments. Each segment is 3 minutes, often less than 3 minutes.
Okay.
So why do I point this out? Because I don't need to lecture this during a live event. I can have people watch this training video and then come to the live event to discuss how to apply, if this is the topic, managing expectations. And not only that, I don't need to ask people to watch all 22 minutes of the course. I can ask people to watch maybe 1 or 2 modules at a time. Okay. Think about how they can apply that, go apply it, and then come back together and let's talk about that. So
in a really primitive way, then, would you say, like, you take a PowerPoint that might just be reams of 80 slides, you break it into use the section technology there to break it up into different sections, and maybe you could even put your own brackets on, like, how long it takes to review this or whatever.
Absolutely. And that, then I don't need to waste everybody's time all at once to go through a lecture. Now, some people probably asked this earlier. That's one of the pre-engagement things, saying you need to be accountable for this information by the time we get to the live meeting.
Right.
And participants will quickly learn, oh, I didn't do the work, I'm going to need to catch up.
Sure.
That's the same as live training, though, right?
Yep. Yeah. I had another interesting tip that came in from Jessica Gallant at Rogers, and she said one of the things she does not to embarrass people when she's testing people and calling them out is she tells them, she says, Micah, in about a minute or two, I'm going to ask you a question about the topic blah. And it just gives people time to, like, reflect and prepare an answer so that they don't end up being embarrassed. So if you got a room full of 20 some people, you want to make sure that you're not doing that too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So cool. What other questions have come in, Mike? I want to make sure we get to some of these questions that other people have shared.
There's some repetition in the themes that we've talked about, some of them. Okay. So So this is an interesting one.
Yeah, so the question is how to ensure the instructor speaks to each learner in a class of 25 a few times during the session online. Same strategy as if we were all in the same room together. Yep. So in some senses, 25 is more difficult. I wouldn't have everybody on a video with audio. When I've done I would do that with 10. With 25, I've turned off everybody's audio, and I'll ask people to simultaneously chat. I use chat and polling/quizzing to get people engaged. And then we have not done a good job of this today, demonstrating this one thing, Micah, which is giving people a little bit of time and space to type or do an activity.
Yes.
If I'm facilitating training, I will do that. And while people are doing that, I might then pop in and message individual participants.
Okay.
Just as you would individually check in on participants in an in-person environment, I'm just adapting that concept to the technology.
So if we reverse there, where I did kind of the holistic person comment, if we had just frozen and gave the airspace for everybody to type, and then you would go into the chat and kind of respond to different things, and you're
Exactly.
just being comfortable with some dead air there.
Yeah.
Yep, I like that. And I think previously we'd mentioned as well about Zoom allows you to pick a person and chat with them specifically, versus the whole team.
Micah, there was one question. If you're searching for one, I was hoping that we could address, because I think other people have this one. It was about, how do I break down really complicated information?
Yeah,
Whereas,
there was some, I clarified, and with McCool had, from Nova Scotia Power had mentioned that one. And so there was this very complex scenarios and exceptions. And in the classroom, when I clarified with them, it was really like, man, when I'm in physically teaching, I've got a whiteboard and I've got, like, I can be right there with them. And there's some stuff that I can do when I'm in person that just feels like it's more challenging. Is that kind of the one?
that's the one.
Yeah.
And I want to give people a real simple tip to break down complex information, whether I'm in person or via webinar, or anything else. And that is to use visuals or analogies. So visuals that are text-heavy PowerPoint, not great. People don't like that.
Right.
But
Heavy
visuals or
reading.
analogies to simplify a concept. So as an instructional designer, I'm often asked to explain the instructional design process, and people often are confused by what goes into it. And so I'll give this little analogy. This is a poorly drawn example of what? What do you think this is?
It appears to be a dwelling place, a house of some sort.
Yeah, it's a house. Thank you. It's poorly drawn, but it's a house. So when I talk to people about training, I say building a training program is like building a house. Okay. So how are they the same? Well, there's three things. First step, you have to decide what you want. So if I'm going to build a house, I have to think, is it a single story, detached home? What style? Is it a townhome, a high-rise condo? And with training, it's the same thing. Like, what's the objective? And we already covered this, helping them do their job.
Yeah.
Second step.
In Canada, Jeff, you need a basement. Just
what's
so
that?
you know. In Canada, you need a basement.
You need a basement. So second step is I need a blueprint. So if I'm building a house, I'm not going to just go to the lumberyard and get some boards and start, hammering them together. I'm going to hire an architect, create a design concept, and virtually move different pieces around to make sure it's going to work. Training is the same way. Before you build the training, you create a blueprint. Training, we call it a design document. It's the same thing. It says, here's how it's going to work. Third step, I hire someone to build it, or I build it myself. So if I'm building a house, I take the blueprint, and that's when we start putting the pieces together. The training is the same thing. We take that design document, and that's when we create our exercises, our visuals, or whatever. So I've just taken a very complex topic that really is, as a designer, way more than 3 steps, but I use a simple visual and a simple analogy to say, if those 3 steps, you kind of get, 3 steps. If you know those 3 steps, those 3 steps, you get the concept.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, adult struggle, the struggle to learn. Sherry Kendall had said that, knowledge is not consumed, it's created, I think I might've misquoted her, but it's this idea that you don't just consume and know, that you have to actively put yourself up against the material and turn it into synapses in your brain, and that's an active process. And so objects, when there's object lessons, when you have visuals, it starts to give you something to tie what you're thinking through and learning. You're able to almost put it into that object and create memories and then bring that back later. So it's pretty cool.
Hey, Michael, one of the things that we need to demonstrate is it's okay for live virtual training sessions to end a little early, but never go late. So
Yes,
I
that's
want to be
true.
aware of our
Yeah.
time.
I was going to say the same thing. So you have a slide that you want to show that will not only give people extra resources and opportunities to go learn even more and engage with you, but we want to be able to make sure that we take everything that was here. And so go ahead and share your screen there.
Sure. So a couple of things I want to share with people. One, very quickly, this is a quick share. I've put together a website with webinar tools. So like, what are the tools that I use for audio, video, and lighting? And I'm just going to put this
in the chat.
In chat. So there's going to be a link here.
And I checked out that resource and I really liked it. I'm using, see if I can get it out here. I'm using this lamp here. I don't know if
your lighting looks great.
Yeah, so I got a little desk lamp, and it takes the wrinkles out of my eyes and my face. So I'm really happy with that.
I think
but
that's
you had
the most important part.
There was a cheap little one that you could just put on your laptop, and so I'm thinking about getting that because it wouldn't be so bulky on my desk.
That one's on my list. It's a Loom cube, and it affixes to. And I'm using it right now, and it makes the lighting look great.
Oh, you're using it. Awesome.
So the link is in for the tools. It just gives you a list of simple. They're all either tools you already have, so that's free to low cost. And then this screen, I wanted to give you some examples of what we would call asynchronous. In other words, we don't have to be live, but and also synchronous. So 2 resources, the training activities workbook. These are customer service training activities. There's 10 that you can run. And then also my customer service tip of the week, which is a single weekly reminder. And a lot of customer service teams use this. They send it to the team, and then people read it, try to apply it. And then maybe in a team meeting or a huddle, there's a discussion around it. So you can use either of these to do a in-person, not in person, or a blend of do something on your own, do something together. And the way you get the resource is text the word hidden to 66866. That only works if you're in the US. I'm so sorry. So I've given you also another a web address that works anywhere, toistersolutions.com/hidden, and you can get to it that way. So I'll leave that up there for just another second, and then we'll go back to the video here.
Awesome. Well, I agree with you, Jeff. We certainly don't want to go over our time. We know other people have meetings to go to and everything, but I just wanted to say thank you, and we've really appreciated having you with us today, and hopefully the audience got a chance to learn some tips and tricks. Hopefully the meta stuff sticks with you as well, in terms of we weren't just teaching tips, but we were trying to demonstrate them in some way. And so as I promised before, we will be emailing out the link to the recording of this if you want to rewatch it, and also we'll try to attempt to answer the questions more fully for everyone that didn't quite get their answer today. And then if it makes sense, if we've got more volume, if there's more interest in the subject, Jeff, we'd love to do it again and just see if we generate a whole new round of questions. So yeah, thanks Jeff for being with us today. Thanks for everybody being on the call. Thanks Amanda for setting this up, and hope you stay safe. That hopefully this all ends soon, and we can see each other again in person. But until then, we'll just keep working away and enjoying our family time.